And God knew of its hygienic benefits as well, and medical science today tells us that it lowers significantly the risk of cancer in that area, as well as phimosis and certain kinds of inflammation that can be very, very serious, particularly among those who have diabetes. So it has a medical hygienic purpose. God, knowing that, authored it in the life of His people, but that was not the major purpose for it. Although it is hygienic, that was not God's primary design. God ordained it as a symbol, as a sign, very important one. Not just for physical benefit, but as a spiritual reminder. And the reminder is simply this, and I'll see if I can give you a full understanding of it. Nowhere or at no point is a man's depravity more manifest than in the procreative act. You say, why do you say that? Well, we know man is a sinner by what he says. We know man is a sinner by what he does. We know man is a sinner by the attitude, the bearing that he carries. We can see on the outside sinful deeds. But how do we know man is a sinner at the base of his character? How do we know man is a sinner at the root of his existence? The answer, by what he creates. Whatever comes from the loins of man is wicked, because man is wicked. So I say to you, nowhere then in the anatomy of a man or in the activity of a man is depravity more manifest than in the procreative act, because it is at precisely that point which he demonstrates the depth of his sinfulness, because he produces a sinner. And I would remind you that Jesus Christ had no human father, because there was no human father who could produce a perfect person. The Spirit of God had to plant a perfect seed in Mary and bypass a human father. You say, well then, still, what is the connection with that and circumcision? When God demanded that they circumcise the male, He was giving them a symbol that the outward part of man's procreative organ was cleansed, to remind them that man needed to be cleansed of sin at the deepest root of his being. That was the idea. Man needed to be cleansed of his sin through a spiritual surgery at the very root of his nature. And that very graphic symbol was chosen because that is the procreative point at which man produces sinful man. So man in his natural condition is a sinner, and he produces sinners, 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 and nothing but sinners. At the very point of his nature, then, he needs cleansing. And every time they circumcised a person, and every time they circumcised a little 8-day-old male child, they were reminding themselves of the fact that man at his very base nature was a wicked sinner, and desperately in need of a cleansing. It was an illustration of the sinfulness of man, and even the bloodshed that occurred in circumcision could symbolize the need for sacrifice to accomplish that cleansing. So there was even a picture of the pain and the sacrifice in the circumcision as well. Now, did God intend that it just be physical? No. God intended that it be a symbol which would have far more meaning than just that. Very early it became important. In fact, there aren't too many commands at all in the Bible about circumcision, because the people did it. And so there wasn't any prevailing reason to command them to do it. They very carefully, very judiciously observed it. I might just note that they were always very good at doing the outward things. And they did this. In Joshua chapter 5, do you remember what happened in Joshua chapter 5? All of the children in the wilderness had been marching for 40 years in the wilderness. The old generation had died off, and now there was a new generation. We don't know exactly how many of them, but they could have numbered in the several millions of people. They've all grown up in the wilderness. In Joshua 5, the Lord says to Joshua in verse 2, "Make for yourself flint knives and circumcise again the sons of Israel the second time. The prior generation had been circumcised. This generation, born in the wilderness and now growing up, had not been circumcised. So they made flint knives and they circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath Ha'araloth. Now, they may well have circumcised 1 million people, which is an unimaginable scene. That is what God required. He wanted His people circumcised. He says in verse 4, all of the ones who came out of Egypt were already circumcised. They've died. You must circumcise this generation as well. And so circumcision was followed. According to Exodus 12:48 and Leviticus 12:3, it was non-optional. It was required. And the people, for the most part, complied with circumcision. It is a curiosity to me that they, as far back as Genesis 34, were already seriously committed to the matter of circumcision. And you have in Genesis 34 a bizarre story. Dinah, the daughter of Leah, who was born to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her. What happened was, Shechem, the son of King Hamor, raped Dinah, the daughter of Leah. And, of course, Shechem spoke to his father and said, get me this young girl for a wife. I want her. Not only did he rape her, but he wanted her as a wife. Now, Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter, but his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came in. Then Hamor, the son of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. Now the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved, and they were very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. Fornication, and I believe a form of rape. And now the guy wants to marry her. And Hamor says, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. And intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. In other words, let's intermarry. This is a Hivite. This would pollute the line of Israel, of Abraham. And you'll live with us, and the land will be open before you. Live and trade and acquire property. Here is a satanic rape. Here is a satanic merger. Here is a way to twist and pervert the messianic line by infiltrating it with Hivites who are not of Abraham. Then we'll all live together. Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, if I find favor in your sight, then I will give you whatever you say to me. Ask me whatever bridal payment, whatever gift, and I'll give you according as you say to me, but give me the girl in